Welcome to Moonbeaming, a podcast about creativity, magic, tarot, lunar living, and more. I'm your host, Sarah Faith Gottesdiener, and I am so happy you are here today. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Moonbeaming. I am so excited for today's episode. It is kind of a special Halloween Samhain episode, and you'll find out in a moment. I wanted to first begin by talking about the card I pulled for us for the week. And it's an interesting pull. And it's interesting to also think about it leading up to this full moon that we have this weekend. We are in a waxing moon phase. There is a lot of accumulation of energy happening right now. There could be accumulation of worry or accumulation of anxiety, or we could be seeing the accumulation of a great habit we began at the new moon, or maybe an accumulation or seeing the efforts of a spiritual practice, meditative practice, journaling practice, energetic transmutation practice, whatever it may be. We might be starting to really see it materialize in a particular way. And so just acknowledge that. Acknowledge what is coming up for you. Acknowledge what is coming up for you. Acknowledge what you need to take care of. Acknowledge what is working and what is not working for you. Because the card that got pulled this week was the 5 of Discs, or the 5 of Pentacles. So this week, we are being asked to interrogate where we deny ourselves help or support, where and how we block our blessings. If it's time for you to practice, allowing yourself to receive, allowing yourself to imagine what healthier interactions with yourself or your body or your work in the world could feel like or could be like, then imagine that. Another message this week, like just thinking about this card for everyone, is about implementing a spiritual practice, a set time for a spiritual practice like breath work, meditation, praying, walking, bathing, cooking, whatever that looks like for you. Monday, Tuesday could also be a great time to plan whatever you are going to be doing this weekend around this full moon. On Saturday, we have a full moon in Taurus that corresponds with Halloween or Samhain. So when we begin planning, we begin facilitating an integration between the spiritual and the practical. So thinking about that before we rev up for our full moon. And I spoke a lot about this in episode 1, so I'm not going to speak much more about it. You know, Samhain traditionally is called the Witch's New Year. It is a time for making all kinds of magic. It traditionally corresponds with the time of the year where the veil is thin, where we are acknowledging our ancestors. But as you know, I am a choose your own adventure kind of magical practitioner. So I encourage you to take some time at the beginning of this week to think about what you need, think about what you would like to make magic around, cast a spell around if that's in your practice, do a ritual. And obviously anything can be a ritual if it is done with intention. If cooking a beautiful meal for yourself or a loved one is done with intention, then it becomes a ritual. So I'm wishing all of you a happy, healthy, protected Halloween, Samhain with many blessings, however you choose to celebrate it or not. Okay, my loves. So I am so excited about this week's special guest. This is someone who needs no introduction. This is someone who I have been inspired by for quite a while, and you probably have been too. Whether you've seen her in the movies The Craft or Half Baked or on the television show Half and Half, or have enjoyed her As the Hair Dries Instagram lives, you are probably familiar with Rachel True. What you might not know is that Rachel is a devoted tarot practitioner and has been for many decades. And lucky for us, Rachel has just released her very own tarot deck, the True Heart Intuitive Tarot. And it includes a really incredible 200-page guidebook where Rachel shares stories from her life that really help to illustrate and underscore the energies and lessons of the major arcana. It was such an incredible delight to speak with Rachel about all things creative and tarot, and I know you are going to enjoy our interview. I am so thrilled to be here today with my incredibly special guest who all of you already know, the wonderful, the fabulous, the artist, the actress, the writer, the tarot reader, and more, Rachel True. Rachel, would you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Hi, guys. I want to give a big thanks to Sarah for having me on. She's one of I follow her on Instagram and social media, but she's one of the first people who kind of reached out to me about the book and took it seriously as a project. So I want to thank you so much, and I'm a fan of your feed.
Thanks. So let's get into this. This book, you are an amazing writer. I had no idea. I laughed. I cried. You wrote this incredible guidebook that not only has practical information, has incredibly spot on interpretations of all of the cards, that has spreads, has ways to tap into your intuition, but it also has you creating your life as like a memoir through tarot. And you really evoke the essences of the archetypes through your life's journey and life stories that you so generously share with us. And I just want to say, like, it speaks to your knowledge of the tarot. It speaks to your relationship to your own spiritual practice. You've given a solid gift. I'm going to read a little bit from the book now, if you don't mind.
No, sure. I just want to say though, it means so much to me that people like you and other practitioners in the esoteric arts who are knowledgeable and learned are looking at the contribution I've given. It means so much, very much to me.
Well, it's an amazing accomplishment. So you write, my tarot decks are among my closest and best forever friends. I'm a lifelong practitioner and part of a movement committed to demystifying and destigmatizing esoteric studies. The tarot tells the story of humanity, giving you insight into yourself by helping you clarify the now and make better choices for the future. They're like a shrink in a box and a spiritual Xanax all rolled into one. And I love that so much. You do this amazing job throughout the entire guidebook and your memoir and all of that of explaining the tarot in these clear, practical terms. And I'm wondering if in your own practice, is there like a fail-safe way that you introduce yourself or work with the cards that to get the answers that you need?
Well, one thing I hope I've made clear in the book too is that everybody's practice is going to be different. And I respect that so very much because the way I do things isn't necessarily going to resonate or work for someone else. So I would say for me, I go through stages to be 100% honest. There's sometimes I do try to set an intention in a space. I personally do always ask my deck a question, unless I am specifically doing just a general energy for the day, which is very useful as well, by the way, just if people are pulling. But one of the things I've noticed from the newer school coming up is people don't necessarily use spreads. They just kind of pull cards and then pull more clarifying cards. Now, that's fine. That's another way of working. I personally call my card interpretations for a reason, because they're not definitions. There's a lot of schools of thought. I'm adding mine to that. But the way that I operate is I like spreads because then I don't have to pull any qualifier cards, to be 100% honest. Like if the cards are the car, the spreads are the map, which is helping show you what they're trying to tell you in the information. So when you say to get what I need or want out of the cards, quite often the cards don't give me what I want. They tell me what I need. That's the God's honest truth with, I think, working with these esoteric arts. The other thing is you can absolutely divine and tap into our psychic intuition with cards. A lot of us who've been using cards for a long time don't even need the cards anymore to do it, right? Because they've been a tool to help us get to that point. But, and I've said it before, but I keep saying it because there's a lot of newly minted baby witchlings out there. And that is amazing that, like, Fruza Balk and I were actually giggling a while back that we had kind of actually helped bring witchcraft in a sense to pop culture, right? But because y'all are out there going, I'm a witch, what I'm saying, at least in my book, is yes, you are, but start at the beginning. You have to learn to walk before you can fly your broomstick. And part of that is simply understanding that a lot of us, especially Americans, let's say, our intuition is blocked by our horrible standard American diet, which inflames our cells and we can't get in touch with our intuition, or we watch a lot of television or whatever it is. And I do all these things too, by the way. What I'm saying is, though, there's a time where that kind of can cloud our intuition, or sometimes we spin in anxiety constantly and that clouds our intuition. So you can divine with the cards, but the first step, I think, in utilizing and learning tarot cards is to actually learn what they are. Learn what all 78 mean. I think it's kind of important. I do say to use your intuition first, though. It's great to look at a card, use your intuition to see what you think that card means, right? Because you're probably dead on, and that is you. That's the magic of the cards, to be honest. It is not the cardboard paper cards. It is how they hit us on a visceral level and what they unlock in your subconscious, because I speak in terms of high and low vibe. And when I'm in low vibe, it's very hard for me to hear God's word. If you're religious, you would call it that way. I'm not particularly religious, so I say my higher self. And I don't want to keep babbling, but I love talking about this subject, and tarot cards have been such a big part of my life that's why I wrote an accompanying book and a 200 plus page book to go along with this.
Certain readers will describe a particular way that cards speak to them. Like for some, it's actual literal sound. For others, it's maybe a tingly feeling in their body. I'm wondering, how do the cards most often speak or talk to you?
Well, I guess it's in imagery and what comes first, the feeling we have about things, or the idea, the concept, the thought. But for me, I talk about this a little bit in the book. How I got into tarot cards was at a very young age. I pulled down 2 books from my parents' library bookcase. I don't know why I call it a library, guys. It was a big bookcase. And one was Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil, and the other one was Carl Jung's Man and His Symbols. Now,
just some light reading for baby Rachel.
Well, here's the thing. My stepmother taught us to read at 4.5, so I could actually read, but clearly I wasn't comprehending those books. I was picking up a word or two here and there, and it was the imagery. It was the imagery. So then, a couple years later, a friend of my parents gave me a tarot deck, and I went, oh my goodness, wait a second. It's reminding me of those books that I used to pull down. And especially Man and His Symbols, there's some of the same symbols in that book that are on tarot cards. So I recognized that this was a language I could probably learn to speak or parse or whatever you want to say. So that, I guess I feel it that way. But to really answer your question, what happens is I'll look at a card, and because I'm an actor too, I sort of trip off in a movie in my mind about the energy around the card, and I tell a little story about it. And I think I have a story in the book too about how I used to live in my imagination all the time as a child. So I think it's from that habit.
I love that. If you're all right with talking about some of the imagery on the particular cards, because so many of them are so cinematic. Are you okay with me asking
Yeah,
you?
of course.
Because you concepted the imagery, like you came up with the ideas and were with like the art director.
I was the art director. Now, because I was working with my publishers, Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, who were fabulous, the process was a little different. Like, I am a very gregarious person, at least when I'm not a hermit in my house, and very, very quiet. That's my truth. I have a duality. But the artist is a very much air sign and was in Canada and didn't work the way that I would have wanted. I would have loved to go on there and brainstorm. And they were like, no. So what I would do, and that's what happened when you work for other people, by the way. Like, it's just something you got to roll with. That's the truth. So what I did was write up briefs and pull a lot of artwork. Like, for example, on the sun card, there's a beautiful sun with little hands, and that's from an Egyptian. I love it too. It's from an Egyptian relief I found from thousands of years ago. So I would pull the artwork. I wrote up a second book for the artist, is basically what I did. I did at least a novelette, because I had to write everything again up for her. The publishers would send to her. She would send an artwork back. I would give critiques, then they would pass it on to her. It was a very, labored process in that sense, but I think she did a lovely job with quite a few of my concepts.
Can we talk about this Four of Cups?
Oh, I love that you brought that card out, because a lot of people don't get the reference to that card. And in fact, some people were confused by why I chose two, but I'm going to describe it. It's basically it's a person on their own planet, and it's the Four of Cups, and they're putting a cup over a little red rose, and then it looks like in the background maybe someone's keeping an eye on them and watching them. So I really love this card because it's a literary reference. I used to read a book a day when I was a kid, and no one believed me, so they tested me on comprehension and had to give me all the gold stars. So literature, I lived my life in literature because I didn't love certain things that were going on in my life as a child. So instead of becoming, I think, angry and acting out, I just lived in fantasy land. And that's a reference to The Little Prince, one of my favorite books when I was a kid. And I know if you're a tarot aficionado, right? Normally, that's the Four of Cups, is the person sitting alone under the tree, and there's a hand handing them a cup. Now, I didn't want it. Some cards are similar to Rider Waite because I wanted to honor Pixie, the artist, but at the same time, Pamela Coleman Smith. But at the same time, I wanted to switch it up. And I feel like when someone is offering us a cup and we don't really want it, or sure, their eye is on us, and that's why I use that imagery. And I think it works. It works for me. And I think that's the beauty of how there's so many tarot decks out, right? And that's great, because you're going to get a different feeling from that Four of Cups than someone else's, and you're going to get a different feeling from another deck's Four of Cups. And to me, that is the magic of tarot, to be honest. But thanks for picking out the card. There's a couple literature cards and a couple cards that are, like, for example, the Eight of Swords in my deck is, I love what the artist Stephanie did with this, because what had happened was, around the time I was working on the deck, all my hair broke off because I had a hair tragedy. And we know as women, we have a lot of ego wrapped up in hair. I mean, it's our crown and glory and all that, right? But I had to really think about why I was being so affected by my hair breaking off, other than I wanted to know what health-wise was going on. That's important. But B, I realized it was just ego. And when we talk about the Eight of Swords, right, in the original deck, that is a person tied to the swords. Their bandage on their face is not on too tightly, and they could extricate themselves from the situation, but they're mentally stuck to it. So I realized in the Eight of Swords card, I have got this octopus-like shape of hair, and it's attached to the swords, because it wouldn't hurt that person on my card to break away. You just got to cut off those little split ends. That's all you got to do. And that doesn't physically hurt us, but mentally it hurts us.
I have so much to say. I have so many questions about art, life, tarot, living the tarot, healing, transformation. So I wanted to bring up like the way you've shared your life through the tarot cards is breathtaking. It becomes really meta once we get to the world. Like you like sharing, well, I've come to the end of my journey. And we're like, oh my gosh, I got a little tingly when I finally got to that point. It's like this memoir. So I'd love to hear you talked about this a little bit just now, but I'd love to hear about some of the cards that came up for you when you were in the process of doing this major epic project, or what archetype or card did working on this project most feel like for you?
Well, High Priestess, to be sure. I even went and took a trip to New Orleans for research and met with a voodoo High Priestess there, as well as some other tarot practitioners. And I thought, by the way, I was going to write about that weekend. And then it turned out to be a romance gone bad at the same time. And I didn't want to conflate them. So I kind of left. I thought all High Priestesses and not talk about it at all, actually. But I would say, yeah, the High Priestess has always been a lot of lessons for me, because when I was very young, I was very intimidated by her. She looked so dour in the Rider Waite, very austere and white and dour, right? But as I got older, I thought, no, Rachel, you didn't like her because you had to learn to shut your mouth sometimes.
I love that story.
It's true, though. The High Priestess knows to be quiet. And I was always like, probably from coming out of foster care, like, hey, listen to me. Listen to my opinion. Listen to me. I'm here. So I think that's why I own up to some of my own behavior in there. And thank you so very much for talking about these essays, because they were harder than you'd think to write. If you're going to fillet yourself and put your baggage, some of your stuff out there, I had to get correct with myself and be okay with it. I also had to get correct. I lead my life in a pretty decent way, I think, but I had to get even more correct with certain behaviors so that I could go about writing what is essentially a self-help book, right? Tarot, but mixed in with these memoirs of mine. And I'm not a bullshitter in my life. So a lot of people said to me, just make some stuff up for the essays. Everybody does it for the memoir. And I thought, no. I really think the parallel between how I use tarot in my own life, for example, using a love thing for the hangman. I know that most people think that's weird, probably. But because I have years and years of tarot stuff, right? And I don't just look at the hangman like YouTubers do, like they're stuck on you. Because that's a part of the card, but it is not the totality. It is seeing things from a different perspective shift and a temporary. You're not going to stay in stasis forever. And that is why I chose to talk about a great love affair I had in my 20s, which I knew going into it would not last forever.
What I also love though about what you shared is that the beauty of that relationship was about poetry and was about like spiritual awakening. And even when you shared, like you still have a nice relationship with them. And I love that you sort of took this archetype and twisted it. And you do that a lot. Like you sort of turn it on its head and then show us in a way where it makes sense in this total way where I'm like, of course, this is hanged one. This is spiritual transformation. Nothing is forever. Like thinking that something had to last forever in order for it to be successful.
To be valid
Yeah.
in your life, which is, I say in the book, maybe I don't, but like I'm a Victorian lady, right? If I date someone, I want to know they love me and want to marry me, all this stuff that's ridiculous at 20. So I had to shift and look at things from a different perspective. And I got so much out of that relationship. And as you said, we're still super tight friends. And he's one of my biggest champions, is the other thing. He believed in me at a very young age when other people were telling me to go get a job at, TV, whatever, in retail and sell clothes instead of pursue my dreams. So I'll always appreciate that. And I think I didn't go out of my way to shift the essays to weird things that you wouldn't necessarily think. But I wanted to show outside of the box ways of looking at the cards, because while their popularity right now is amazing because everyone can benefit from them, I think people are getting really trapped into rigid. People aren't studying. Back when I started, there was a lot of reverence for studying. This is an art, like any art. People say they want to be actors and they don't want to take an acting class, and then they suck when they go to an audition. It is no different with your magic studies or your self-reflection studies. And again, I'll say tarot works great in tandem with therapy, but I wrote this book because it's the kind of book I would have loved to have when I was first starting. I mean, there's some great books like Mary Kay Greer and terrific books when I was coming up. But I also wrote it in a way so that hopefully, and I think it can resonate with learned practitioners such as yourself who are open to new perspectives. Because the one thing I know about tarot, and I've been studying it for decades, right? And I wrote a book about it. I am still a student of tarot.
Same.
Yeah, you too, right? I will always be evolving my impression of the interpretations and what a card really means. And I talk about, I think a little bit, the is it the High Priestess? No, the Hermit, which I think I call the Crone. I say, I was very scared of that card when I first got it too back in the day because I thought it was some old shriveled up crone, which would be my age now, and I don't feel terribly shriveled up.
Not a drop. You're hydrated.
But also as a Gen Xer, coming up during a time when white women's liberation movement was really hitting, yes, we had like Bewitched, right? Okay, there were 60s. That's a little before my time. There was that. But once the women's rights issue really hit, the Disney-fied version of women and magical women became old gnarled hag crone who's going to kill you with her magic apple. Period. End of story, with the bump on the nose and the hair on the chin. So I remember thinking, oh God, is that? And I had to, go through my own things I've been taught and sort of have a new impression of this card, because the Hermit or the Crone or the Hanged Man, what I've learned, and in writing, I already knew it, but in writing the book, it really hammered it home, because the way I write about cards is high and low vibration, not reversals. And you take a card like the Devil, right? Most of the time, like, there are bad cards in the deck. You don't really want that popping up too much. But the truth is, on the high vibe side of the Devil, in the best way, because the Devil was a fallen angel, right? So the best way, I would say, the high vibe of that card is breaking free of the chains of society, or even bacchanalian good time is how I describe it in the book. I just wouldn't want to have that 365. I'd be dead and my liver would give up. So it's not about engaging in that stuff all the time, but a little bit of a devil of a good time is fine. It is just most of us, including myself, get sucked into the negative part of the devil, which would be that negative voice, that anxiety voice in our head that says you suck, which happened to me many times while writing the book, by the way. And that's why I really appreciate you're taking in my writing, because I love writing so much. Like, I'm an artist, right? I'm an actor. I sew a dress too. I made a jacket. I write. I feel like everything I do, honestly, and everything I do is art. I live my life as if everything is art.
I would love to share another passage, one of my favorite passages, also one of my favorite cards as well. From beautiful.
The Scorpio card.
Yeah, oh yeah, happy birthday, by the way. What a nice
Almost
birthday gift, right?
It's Scorpio season.
Yeah, so I'm going to read just a short passage from your essay about death. Transforming for me has usually meant relinquishing the constrictive amniotic blanket of who I thought I was to bloom into who I'm meant to be. I am nothing if not constantly rising from the metaphorical ashes, albeit at times from fires of my own making. The very nature of being alive means having to process difficulties without letting it debilitate life or derail dreams. Actors know the show must go on, and every death card pulled signifies a brand new Fool card beginning. You talk about this, you spoke about this earlier in the interview, and you weave this throughout the book, your interpretations, your stories, as well as helpful tools and techniques for healing, for like healing the self. And you give us many, like there's temperance, like you give us many different suggestions throughout the entire, memoir, guidebook, hybrid, sort of amazing, offering you've made for us. How do you know how to self-heal? Like, how do you know, like, help us out, Rachel, give us some advice.
First of all, I don't think you do know how to heal until you can identify the issues that need to be healed, right? So that's kind of why I love tarot, because especially if you use a spread, I include the Mother Peace spread in there for a reason. I just love that spread. It's a modified Celtic cross, but it gives so many more angles to look through. But for example, in that spread, there's a root consciousness card placement. So quite often, that is a good tip off. If I'm doing a big spread, the card that comes up in the root consciousness would be the things that are bubbling up in a subconscious way, or things that I've suppressed or pushed down. That card will always give me a tip in to what layer of myself I have to peel off. But also listen, I think again, part of writing this book was because I had to learn to self-soothe, and I wasn't taught that as a child per se. So when we are adults and we start mimicking our parents, they taught us great things, but then they taught us some negative things. Like my dad was bipolar and used to have tantrums, until he got on the right meds. So I know in my very late teens, I remember throwing things, because that's what I was taught. If you're mad, you throw something. And I remember breaking a stereo I'd spent my own money on, and because I'd thrown something and it hit it, and I, didn't have a lot of money, and that in itself was a watershed moment, like a tower moment, because a tower is a heavier card than death, frankly, but in its highest vibe is a moment of spiritual enlightenment, right? So when I broke something I very much paid for and loved, it hit me like a bolt of lightning, like, this is a bad habit, Rachel. You're hurting yourself. That was the first moment of realization. And then it became becoming aware of when I was feeling those feelings started to bubble up, and learning to recognize. And I do a thing where I send them away. But I also love, at a very practical level for people, I love something like the tapping method. Are you familiar with that?
EFT, yeah.
Yeah, and again, I haven't actually studied it, but what little I just read about it and went, yeah, there's something to that. As an actor, I understand that emotions get stored in our body and can become toxic, and disease creates disease. So there's something about the tapping method, tapping these meridian points while saying I am releasing this fear or whatever it is, that I found actually effective, to be totally honest. So whatever, it's developing a practice. And I think, and again, if people have a lot of deep-seated stuff, like most of us do, a little bit of therapy goes a long way in tandem with our magic studies. That's my truth on that.
One thing that I appreciate your openness and your honesty, which goes along with what you said, that in order to sort of shift something, we have to face it and we have to address it. And one thing that I mean, like, you share so much in this book. There is something in this book that every single person on the planet can relate to. Run out, get this book. Not only is the art some of the most beautiful I've seen come out, in the last few years, but what you share, I think every person, by you sharing your highs, your lows, and everything in between, it's just everyone can relate to it,
Oh,
right? And this isn't like necessarily a question, but one thing I was super appreciative of your sharing, that is not in so many other tarot guidebooks, is like all of the recounts of racism you've had
oh,
to experience, like especially in Hollywood and the industry. And like one thing, I'm especially grateful to you for recounting what happened to you with the craft, because like I think folks don't always know what is going on behind the scenes of like their most beloved movie, and you advocate for yourself. You show yourself advocating for yourself. And what it does is, like, one, it's just like shows how terrifying, horrible, and abusive like our country is and everything that people have to deal with. But there is this sort of it seems like it was like this way for you to move through it. Does that make sense?
in writing the book to move through it, or
And naming it,
yeah.
like, just naming it, advocating for yourself, like, being like, "This is your problem," you know?
Well, I think, thank you. And I think it's because I am a grown up now, too. Because honestly, I just was talking with a friend of mine who's got a teenage daughter going through the exact same thing, dealing with colorism and all this. And I told her to call me and look at some of the stuff in my book. It is difficult. And the truth is, when I was cast in the craft, I remember reading the script. And she was originally bulimic, my character, and they switched that to the racism thing, right? And I remember thinking, though, this is how I was brainwashed by America at the time. Oh, what's my actual issue? She's burned, she's crazy, she's whatever she is, suicidal, racist. No, of course, yeah. But what's my actual issue? Because of course there's racist. Yeah, I deal with that all the time. I discount it as not. It's not that it's not a problem. It's just that I know it's part of my life, and I got to deal with it. And I just put it in a box over there. And I was disappointed when we shot that movie that I didn't actually have something else. And then it didn't take me too long after that to realize, no, I'm glad that storyline was in there. I'm sorry I don't have parents like the other cast members, but I'm
Right,
glad.
like, what?
But even in the publicity of that, I talk about how I was excluded from that. And I don't even think, like, Nev was kind enough to ask the producers to include me on one run, but even she didn't understand why they were excluding me. She thought it was because you're not as famous as us. And I get that, but I was like, no, it's hi, which one of these fucking brown chocolate drops looks different? And nobody. And then if you're, I don't know if you're aware of this, but I think I wrote that essay after I was being excluded a couple of years ago from the conventions like Comic Cons and things that go on around in movies. They were inviting the other women and not me. And I was sitting here fuming about it because one, I want to reach my fans as well, but also Black people have been kept out of the economic American train the entire time. So here's another economic American train, right? Those conventions, and I'm being completely cut out of them. And I was like, this doesn't really feel fair. And like, no wonder nobody mentions me, because when they talk about the movie, they'll put up a picture of the four of us and then mention all the three actresses and leave my name off. And this is a universal thing, by the way. It's been going on with magazines and things forever, not just with me, because what that does is it reduces me to black girl in the picture without a name. It's not that I think I'm so well known or people should know my name. It is simply for posterity. The same way, Sarah, I think you can realize that when we see a statue of a beautiful woman and it just says dancing woman, it doesn't have the goddess it was or the name. It's frustrating.
I also just wanted to say, like, I don't know that you can say this, but maybe you can. But like, you're a fucking icon. Your role of Rochelle changed everyone's life, like, no matter, and that you continue to be a source of inspiration for so many women, but I know especially Black women, brown women, mixed race women, like, who are witchy, who are weird, like you call yourself weird, so I'm just using that term, like someone who's themselves, like who's their own person, basically, and who is a magical, intuitive creature. So it's also like it's just ridiculous. It's so I don't want to get started on it, but it's also like it's so ridiculous and that you are an icon. You won an NAACP award.
No,
like
I didn't win. I was nominated. But I am glad, Sarah, that this stuff resonates with you, because I know as a small kid, and I experienced plenty of racism in New York City as a city kid too, even though it was very, very multicultural. But, when I moved upstate, one of the first encounters I had was a jump roping contest where somebody was counting my jumps, and we jumped it, and I'd be treated like shit at this school. And she said, Rachel got 106 jumps. She won. And the principal came over and said, no, she couldn't have done that many. And that's been my whole life. People say to me, you can't do that. And I was like, oh, really? You might not know I'm a Scorpio. Also, I'm magical and I believe in myself. And that is the beauty of becoming a grown up now, because yes, there's some parts to being older that are weird, like your knee hurts. But the beauty of being a grown up is really understanding and being comfortable with who and what you are. Because now, if anyone tried to pull the stuff that happened to me on younger jobs or the craft, I would be the first person to speak up and advocate for myself, like I did on Twitter about the conventions and was included. And, there's still a lot of people who are mad at me about that, but like, I don't care.
It's interesting. I was thinking about this as you were speaking and about how, like, telling the truth about really what happens in popular culture and history, all of it is really important. For example, what was really going on in your treatment with the craft. And I was thinking about Pamela Coleman Smith too, right? Like there's been this resurgence in giving her proper dues and, really holding her up as this genius creator
Yeah.
that was one of the most influential tarot decks that has ever been made, right? And so many people have inspiration from her. And I'm thinking about that as a similarity with you, where it's like in the recounting of like the truth and then really like giving people their due, there's this like connection to me between like that thread,
Oh, that's so fun. I mean, that you got that a little inkling, because I purposely, my dedication is to her. And when I was working on the book, the writing of the book, as well as the creating of the card, I really felt like I was trying to channel her energy, and I felt her around me a few times. I also want to shout out Mary Kay Greer again for the book on Pamela Coleman Smith. And I really love that a few people are starting to call it because Ryder was the publisher. So people are starting to call it the Wade Smith, right? And that's actually great, because otherwise my book would be called the Helen Mifflin Harcourt, and we don't do that anymore. The publishers are very important. We need them to publish our books. We're super grateful to Helen Mifflin Harcourt, but I'm the one who wrote it. My name should be on there. She's the artist her name should be on there. And you're right. It's the reason I wanted to stick and honor her drawings is one for her, but two, those are very Jungian images that absolutely work. They are archetypes for a reason, and each and every one of us is on our own hero's journey. And her deck does a brilliant job, especially even though some people have said to me, I don't like her drawings. It doesn't, that's fine. I love Mother Peace, and sometimes I'm not in love with every arts and crafts drawing they have, but I actually love it. I love the totality of it, and I love what she created and that she is getting her due now. I wrote a lot of those essays before. I wrote them all before this year, too.
Oh, wow.
And I think I might have even gone in a little harder had it been after this. I was still in the pre-pandemic world where I'm going to write about this and I'm going to speak my truth, but I'm also going to try to do a little dance here so people understand my point of view. I don't think I'm dancing nearly as much for people these days. I'm pretty straight out about what I say.
I love that. I just have one more question. It's been such a
No,
pleasure.
I could talk to you forever. Actually, can I just say, speaking to peers who are in this world, who are in the world and study all this stuff has been such a gift to me because most of my friends don't know as much about tarot or the world. So I've gotten to speak to a few people, and you're one of them, who are very knowledgeable. And it's really like a meeting of the minds I enjoy.
Obviously your knowledge base, I mean, you know so much, you have so much experience. It comes through so much in this guide while also being really accessible. That's what I love about it. It's not super esoteric, it's not super convoluted. You know, you've read, Jung or
But I
Nietzsche.
did all that on purpose because I know there's books I loved back that I got in the 80s, but they were hard. They were hard for me to understand. They were wrapped in mystery and middle, and part of what I'm trying to do, and I swear to God, I'm going to let you get to your question, but I wanted to demystify this, especially for my fellow Brown and brothers and sisters who are told that tarot is out of alignment with Christ consciousness or whatever your bag is, and nothing could be further from the truth. I always say half the images on these cards are biblical references, and they're designed to get you in touch with your intuition rather than the devil on your shoulder telling you you cannot do it.
Beautiful. I love that. So, as artists and creators, every project informs us, changes us, transforms us, enlightens us. How like you've got this beautiful deck. This is a ton of work. This is a ton of internal work, external work. This is also a culmination of decades of not just a devoted tarot practice, but a devoted spiritual life practice, which you share so generously. How did doing the true heart intuitive tarot transform you?
That's a good question, Sarah. I think, if anything, it made me realize that I know what I'm talking about. I know that sounds like silly and just a simple sentence, but the truth is, I do have decades to pull from on this, right? So whether it is tarot or something else going on in my life, I guess in the end, what I'm saying is I already kind of trusted my intuition, but it really taught me, no, doesn't mean I'm always right, because my intuition tells me I'm wrong quite often. And my intuition is right, I am wrong. So I think, again, just realizing that I have something to offer, and I don't want to be embarrassed about that or be too shy or coy about it, to be frank. Like normally in my life, I don't really buy into the smoke and mirrors of Hollywood too much. I think you can see that in my essays. And I quite often downplay things. And usually I'm already on to the next thing in my mind. But what I'm trying to do in this moment now is celebrate, as you started off this interview saying, because I'm the kind of person who's already like, I finished it. Now I should be directing a movie right now. And I don't give myself time to celebrate the high points, because as we all know, they pass by really fast sometimes. It's sort of why I say in the world card, you've got that thing, take the moment to savor it, because I'm always mourning the ending that's happening rather than, oh, this is done, rather than, look what I did. So I know that's a roundabout way of answering your question, but I think that's one of my truths about that. And then I guess I've also realized in writing this book too, there's people who really study the tarot, and then there's a lot of card slingers out there. I don't know if my offering is going to resonate if you're a card slinger. If you're interested in learning about tarot and the set of guidance it can give you and how it can unlock your own psychic energy, because it's something I mentioned under the High Priestess essay, that I have always been intuitive and I've always been able to sit down and say the one thing that's going to trigger someone without meaning to. So I talk about my High Priestess learning to shut my trap sometimes, and not actually say, because I don't realize I'm getting a psychic hit about them, but I'm saying the one thing that's going to crumple them or make them look at me weird for the whole rest of the night. And so just sort of learning that. Some people are super clairsentient and clairaudient and they really know it's a difference. I don't. I just kind of hear it and say it. And so, again, I've said this in this interview, but I am learning every day when I do a reading. And if you were to, or someone else were to write a tarot book, the tarot lady, Teresa, sent me her book, and I will learn a lot from that because she's a learned practitioner who has another perspective. So I don't know. I guess it also taught me that I already knew that I know nothing, but I'm really clear on that now. I know a little bit, and I put it in the book.
Well, now you're back at the Fool, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. This is me in, I guess, whether it's Temperance or the Star card, releasing, what I have experiences and what I've been through. I guess in some ways it's even more of a Star card, isn't it? Because I released this book into the collective consciousness, unconsciousness, and and now I'm kind of off on my own healing journey from the trauma of writing a book.
They don't tell you that, right?
No, they don't. They don't. And also, for people listening, they're like, how do you write a book? You just start, whether it's a tarot practice or writing a book or playing golf. It doesn't matter. You just start at the beginning. I used to jump into a yoga class at the advanced level and then be like, this sucks. And it was like, no, you suck, Rachel. Start at the beginning. And by the time you get to the advanced class, you're ready.
I love that. I just want to tell the listeners this deck, this guidebook, you'll see, I'm sure, all over the internet. The imagery is gorgeous. It is layered. It is accessible. And the guidebook is too. There are layers. It is easy to access, but there are layers and levels and depths to the knowledge and to your sharing and all of the things. So I really just, I want to thank you so much again for doing this for yourself, doing this for all of us. It's thrilling to have such, like, I don't want to, I'll be straight up because you're a very straight up person. You never know what someone's going to do. Like, you don't know if the person's thing is going to be awesome.
No, listen, one of my biggest fears was that people were going to think the chick from The Craft thinks she knows this shit because she was in a movie. That movie came to me and Feruza. We were both already studying this stuff. Like, I talk about it in the book, I think, but like, I studied tarot the 9 months before that craft script show. It's in the book. The story's in the book, but again, it really means a lot to me that people in this community are receptive to my offering and actually bother to read the book before trashing it, because that's happening to me too. I know there are people who are going to target me because they consider me a quote unquote celebrity. Get me out of here. That's just not a phrase. I don't call myself that. But I understand that when you shine bright, you're going to attract some things, right, that aren't the best influences. And part of that is just learning to roll with it. So I think for anyone listening too, if you've had people say crappy things about you or what you're doing, I think it's really great for you to pull a card yourself, right? And if you get a real heavy card, I always take away from that, oh, okay, I need to be careful of the low vibe or the reversal energy, but the low energy, like, because the devil for me right now would be swirling in doubt or thoughts or worry about what other people have to say. It doesn't mean something bad is going to happen if I were to pull that card for advice. It would simply mean, oh, okay, you got to list, you got to pay attention to your thoughts and keep them in a high vibe. So I don't know. I guess I just love it. Listen, I just love tarot for so many reasons. For practical daily advice, you can use it like for practical advice. You can use it for big concepts going on in your life. And when you do a big spread on one day and you don't necessarily like it, I'm just going to say I don't actually love pulling 6 million cards like the tubers do. What I think you should do is look at the reading, sit with it, Look at it, because if you go away for half an hour and come back and look at those cards, I promise you, you will be struck by inspiration in that
And
one reading.
And it's like normally the card in my experience that repels me the most is the card I need to kind of be with that gives me the answer. You know, when I'm like, "Ah,
Yeah.
I don't like this 5 of swords." But then when I sit with it, like you said, I can address it, I can face it, I can transform the issue. And it's like you said, like you share a lot in the book. It's almost never as bad as you sort of
Like the
like
Nine of
think or the
Swords, for
story.
example. I hated that card when I was a kid. I was or young when doing tarot. I was like, oh no, swords in my head or whatever I thought, And then now I love what my illustrator did with that card. I really love our image. It's a mohawk of swords, but also I don't mind that card now because what I understand is the worst that's going on is the anxiety in my brain. Actually tackling that situation or dealing with it won't be as traumatizing as the way I'm twisting myself up in knots here. And I always want to say this. I don't know if I mention it, but listen, not I can control my thoughts like that. But as I said, my dad was bipolar, so I'm really grateful there are meds out there for people who need them. I think there are some people who are put on them that maybe don't, and it's a hormone thing, like what I went through. So I always encourage people to do their due diligence with doctors. But for the rest of us who can switch our thoughts, tarot is amazing for catching us in our habits of swirling in negativity. And it's hard. We're in a real weird world right now. I get why people are swirling. But one thing I know is even within this pandemic, I sit back and I go, oh, okay, nothing about what I wanted to do is going on. So now I've got to reshift and go, what do I want to
I love this, and this is a beautiful place to end because this is a perfect addition to your
happen?
pandemic-ness, your quarantine. You will experience the cards in a different way. You will get to hear some incredible stories about transformation, healing, and just some like incredible stories, by the way, just in general, from an incredible life. And you'll get to really sit with the cards and yourself in a way and learn and grow and potentially heal. And it's just a beautiful object. So I'm really suggesting everyone pick this deck and this book up. I will put the link in the show notes. And Rachel, I just want to thank you again and again and again. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being you. Thank you for sharing your light. Thank you for being so brilliant and smart and humorous and down to earth.
No, listen, Sarah, thank you so much for having me on. I really, really appreciate it. I'm so glad we got to do this and we actually got to connect because we follow each other on social media, but I hadn't really met her before. So thank you for your time.
Moonbeaming is brought to you by Modern Women. I am your host. My name is Sarah Faith Gottesdiener. Caitlin George Parker is the wonderful editor. Music by Will Owen and me. Witches in the voting booth, witches studying for